Juries. Now, we have been talking about juries for quite a long time. It is a fundamental part of our national infrastructure and part of our fundamental part of our freedom, actually. But most people don't understand the role of juries. So I was quite interested to see this article in the Guardian yesterday. Activists arrested on suspicion of contempt after London court protests. So this was 11 people that were outside a Crown Court and we're holding up various banners and placards trying to explain the role of a jury. 11 arrested, it says in the subheadline there, after holding placards outside court. The judge said could be interpreted as interference with a jury. I think if we're talking about interference with a jury, we need to be looking at what judges are doing with respect to juries. But anyway, what the Guardian didn't say anything about was the group that was actually involved in this protest. So here's their website. It's called Defend Our Juries. Now I'm going to say straight out here, this is not the type of group that people watching the UK Column News, I would imagine, would be wanting to support, because these people are mainly linked to climate protests and so on. But I have to say that in terms of explaining the situation with juries, that website does quite a lot to explain it in a very clear and concise way. So if you can suspend your disbelief on the climate issue, I recommend reading what it is that they say. And, well, we can talk a little bit more about this in a second, but let's just look at a little bit of video from that website and see what they have to say.
We have this right in the UK, which is really, really important, and it's been there since 1670, and it's the right of juries to acquit a defendant based on their conscience. So regardless of what a judge thinks or what the government of the day thinks or what the media think, but on their conscience. And this right is really, it's the kind of puts the moral sense of ordinary people at the heart of our criminal justice system.
The blank banners at the moment, they're becoming a bit of a signifier for just how gagged defendants and protesters are becoming across this nation of ours, and indeed across the rest of the world as well. They're becoming a symbol of resistance in themselves.
In recent months, a retired social worker in her 60s held up a sign which was pertaining to that right of juries to acquit according to their conscience. And she was arrested by order of a judge and threatened with imprisonment. And 24 others since then have been threatened with the same thing for the same action.
So they're describing it as acquittal on their conscience. We might call it annulment by jury or jury nullification. We've been talking about this for many, many years. But let's just have a look at the ways that the juries are being undermined at the moment. So banning those engaged in campaigns of political resistance from explaining their motives and beliefs to the jury. These are things that the judges tend to do. Telling the jury that motives, even if articulated, are irrelevant and must be ignored. That's commonplace. Banning references to a jury's right to acquit the defendant as a matter of conscience. Directing the jury that defences such as necessity, proportionality, or reasonable excuse are not available. And finally, threatening to move to judge-only trials. And this is this last one is a particular threat, but nonetheless, they're absolutely right in highlighting all those other instances. And of course, this doesn't just apply to people that are campaigning on climate issues. This applies to people that are campaigning and protesting on a whole raft of different issues. So again, you may feel that you don't want to support this particular group because they are pro-climate change, but we should be supporting the message here because this is something that applies to everyone, not just people that are promoting the climate change narrative. Now, as I say, this is something that we have been talking about for many, many years. So this was something that we put on screen several years ago. We have been in constitutional crisis for years: breakup of the nation, city-states, abolition of juries, prevention of public oversight in court cases, removal of separation of powers, wholesale privatization of public services, investigatory powers, the power to do anything. The list does go on, but the jury is an absolutely fundamental constitutional freedom that we have in this country. It's a key part of the judicial system, and it's a key part of holding government to account. Now, if you don't understand what nullification by jury means, it means that, for example, if government passes a piece of legislation which a jury feels is inappropriate or doesn't work in a certain set of circumstances, the jury can find someone who's being prosecuted under that legislation innocent of any criminal offence. And of course, that sets a precedent in common law. So this is an extremely powerful tool for juries. It's something that most juries don't understand, and it's something that really needs much broader understanding. As I say, we've been talking about this for years. This is an article from Malcolm Massey in 2012, Jury Nullification, A Power of the People. It's quite a short article. If you haven't read it, please do read it, but most importantly, please do share it. And of course, we would encourage everybody to have a look at, have a listen to the Dissident's Guide to the Constitution. And we talked about annulment by jury in episode 2 of that. So if you haven't heard that series, please listen to it. I cannot overstate the importance of this.
Yeah, and it is phenomenally important. And I think that you're absolutely right to point out that the group that you've referred to, by largely being composed of climate activists and perhaps sort of social justice warriors, as they might be referred to, should be in a way neither here nor there. And there are obvious examples that can be cited where jury nullification has played out in recent years, most notably those that were in court for criminal damage on the pushing of the statue of Edward Colston into the Bristol Harbour and the smashing of enormous plate glass windows at a Barclays Bank building, and both were overturned by juries. But the key issue here, and this is exactly like the sort of defence of free speech, is that if you want to maintain the system, you have to accept the consequences, no matter what they may be. You can't equivocate about it. And I think that's the central point that has to be grasped here. And if sometimes it doesn't play out in the way that you hoped that it would, well, that's the system.
Indeed. And just to finish on the attack on the right to protest, the BBC's been doing a bit of work here, so let's put this one on screen. There we go. Slow walk protests banned at 1,200 locations. So this is an investigation that the BBC did. I just wanted to highlight a couple of points out of this. The scale of efforts by oil companies and public bodies to protect their premises from environmental protesters can be revealed in new BBC analysis. More than 400 demonstrators are named in court orders that restrict protests at more than 1,200 locations. The civil injunctions in force in places like oil terminals, petrol stations, racetracks across England and Wales also apply to persons unknown, meaning anyone can be prosecuted. The anti-protest injunctions limit what people can do, who they can associate with, and where they can go. The punishment for breaching one can be up to 2 years imprisonment or an unlimited fine, a heavier penalty than for the equivalent offences in criminal law. 8 have been taken out by oil companies, including Shell, Esso and ExxonMobil. National Highways for Transport for London account for 5 more, and the other 2 were taken out by local councils. And again, you know, of course, the excuse for this draconian crackdown on protest is the likes of Just Stop Oil and so on. But if Just Stop Oil's behaviour is resulting in this type of limitation on the right to protest, that limitation on the right to protest applies to us all. And even if we don't agree with what Just Stop Oil is doing, and I personally don't, then we've still got to support their right to do it, because that is our right to also protest as well. So that is the main point I want to make.